you all notice what Elon Musk is calling himself into now? There have been allegations made against him that before he bought Twitter and made it into X, he had essentially put out some tweets, and these tweets led to the value of the platform itself appreciated, and then he was able to buy it at a significant low price. Yeah, and the price tag was also very significant. Really, the retail investors lost more than $2.1 billion. So this lawsuit is being seen as like justice being served for these retail investors. This goes back to 2022 when he was trying to acquire the platform. So he announced he wants to acquire Twitter. Then what happened is he put out a couple of tweets which cast doubt over whether this would happen. In one tweet, he said that there's a bot activity on Twitter, and so unless Twitter shows him that the bot activity is less than 5%, he's not going to go ahead with acquiring the platform. And then he put out another tweet in true Musk fashion, which said that he thinks bot activity could be as high as 20% or so. And following these tweets, obviously the stock value of Twitter dropped significantly. And a lot of existing investors in Twitter that lost a lot of money. And the issue is because he kind of indicated that he wouldn't be acquiring the platform. He later, however, did end up acquiring the platform, as we all know. The allegation is that by engineering this whole controversy, he basically just managed to acquire the platform at a much lower price. So that's what the main allegation of the lawsuit was, which is that you kind of came in, you created a controversy, you knew the stock prices would drop, we'd lost out in the process, and you've managed to get a platform you wanted for much cheaper than you would have gotten. So that's just defrauded these investors, essentially. So that's what these guys claim, that's what the lawsuit was about, but that's not what the jury actually found. What the jury said is both those statements that he made were misleading, but they didn't think it was an all-out conspiracy to defraud the investors. And to just pick at this a little bit, what it would mean is that, yes, the statements themselves would have caused people to react a certain way, behave a certain way, but there's no way to know that it was made with some bad intent. So Musk lawyers, for example, what they say is, look, all these statements show is that he had a genuine concern about bot activity. There's nothing wrong with voicing those concerns. And clearly this is not the same as just putting some false information out there to defraud people. But of course, those statements had a ripple effect and led to financial losses. So the jury did find those statements to be misleading, which means it was possibly untrue or contained information that turned out not to be true, but wasn't said with the intention of, deceiving somebody or conspiring against them. Right. So like an unintended consequence. Yeah, and that kind of throws into whether justice has really occurred for those retail investors, because sure, he's not been sure he was found, to have misled them, but that's not the same saying that fraud happened. To be fair, it's also extremely tricky to tell fraud with a statement like this. On the face of it, it's quite, objective, but on the face of it, it's just raising a concern. So it can also be tricky to determine this, Yeah, because Elon Musk is not like just an ordinary social media user. He had a massive following back then also, and he was in the process of acquiring X and claiming something about his investment process was an example of information asymmetry. And it was essentially signaling people to make a financial decision. So that makes me a question like, is Elon Musk the influencer in that way? Yeah. Well, he's just innocent to the influencer and what it is. So like we've discussed before, influencers are just influencers that give you financial advice, or they sometimes even are caught saying or using the words not financial advice, but intentionally what their role is to influence the general public to make some sort of a financial investment. So what Elon Musk does is be an influencer. How would this play out if it would have happened in India? I think the most straightforward route to me is, in a way, the way it happened in the US, because in the US it's a securities fraud case and you will have similar enforcement mechanisms in India. I think it's fits very squarely there. But to go into whether he's a influencer, that's an interesting question. I don't think there's a settled kind of answer on this. The way we define influencer under these SEBI guidelines, or even under some other frameworks that regulate influencers, it's quite broad. So anyone with a considerable following who has, say, popular appeal. I'm not
giving the definition in words, but the spirit is basically someone who is known, someone who has a massive following, the capacity to influence people. They are influencers. But it's what those guidelines seek to do that's the problem. The spirit of most of these guidelines is that, listen, there are users who consume your content. They don't know everything about you. So they don't know if you're sponsored by somebody else to put this out. Especially with financial information, you also need to make sure you're giving like good advice, cogent advice. So you also need to ensure that people know your credentials properly. So the emphasis is on transparency, disclosure, and what to do, what not to do. Something like this is more in the realm of fraud than what happened with Musk. So I think it makes for a more straightforward fraud case in my view. But maybe it's a bit of an open question on can you consider him an influencer? Is that a path for you? Yeah, he also had a stake in Twitter even before applying Twitter. Yeah. So in that way, like it makes more interesting to look at from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the intention behind it is where it boils down to, and that is to go to determine the even now. I think the question is open for appeal. But there's one more very interesting aspect of this, which why did the tweet claiming that the platform has bots and a significant bot presence, I think about 20%, to its value tanking in the market?
Yeah.
Yeah, like are bots essentially bad for social media platforms?
I mean, I don't necessarily think so. One, I don't think all bots are the same. For example, a lot of platforms use bots to moderate content. So they're called a mod bot. And these are bots which will be fed through either policies that the platform enforces or community specific rules, like sub community specific rules. And they can take down infringing content. And then you can also have bots which basically come to assist the user in terms of queries, and bots that businesses use to answer consumer queries.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing is like, one, we've been again talking about bots and human accounts like they're binary. But actually, there's an increase in hybrid accounts, which some people call cybots also, which is basically that there's an account in which maybe even most of the activity is done by a human, but some portions of it could be automated. So maybe with meme bots, for example, I time my posts at a certain point and I automate that process just because it's more efficient. Now, is that a bot? And if it is a bot, is its presence necessarily a bad thing?
So I think the way a platform, or even literature defines bots varies significantly, and I don't think there's one straightforward answer for this. But this concern has been raised before. Recently, there was a report about bots existing on Roblox, and the allegations were essentially the same, where they were saying that a significant proportion of Roblox users or daily active users are bots. So when the platform sees that they have this number of daily active users and a significant proportion of that are bots, it can inflate its value. Yeah. So I guess this is where our concern with bots in this particular context stems from. It's the same concern we've seen with something like viewporting on platforms like Twitch or YouTube. They've always come up with policies to combat this particular harm.
Viewporting would be like when it's a bot artificially boosting views to your account, basically.
Yes, it's basically any inauthentic view that basically brings traction to a channel, a stream, a creator.
Yeah.
And you can easily track this happening in real time. And now with AI, it's getting a little more nuanced to track with what's mimicking human behavior. But on platforms, usually it goes from like a stream having 10,000 views to 35,000 views suddenly. And that can have significant impacts on how a platform monetizes, for example. For example, if you are a business wanting to target consumers on a particular platform and you want to basically cater to a particular demographic, right? But if a significant proportion of that demographic is now bots, you're not getting the value you would have if the bots didn't exist on the platform.
Bots haven't gone away from Twitter even after the acquisition, right? So was that discussed in the lawsuit as well?
I mean, no, I don't think it came up in the lawsuit as such, but you can question then whether the acquisition really solved that problem, right? Because if the principle was, I'm not going to acquire this until this is solved, post the acquisition, while I think there may have been measures to, have bot disclosure and some of these other things, theory, you still see bot accounts on Twitter today. And I think you were also seeing Musk posts about it fairly often. So it's clearly still something that we're dealing with. I'm trying to think when I go back what is it about inauthentic accounts that scares us? And I think it's that we don't trust an account when it's not human. But as we've also seen, harmful stuff often is spread by humans themselves as well. So some of this is a flawed presumption to begin with, which is that just because something is a bot or it's not a human, it's going to be inherently more harmful than a human. But there are enough ways to, there's enough to show you what humans are doing.
Like only a problem in terms of investors and shareholders when it comes to faking the active users or inflating the numbers the platform is attracting and messing with the advertising tools essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So what will happen with the case next? Will justice really be served?
I mean, we'll have to see on appeal because the lawyers are very clear that they think this verdict is only a bump in the road and they actually think that his concerns are pretty genuine. So we'll have to see what the court does on appeal in this particular case. In the meantime, unless there's a stay, in fact, there's a speculation that damages in this case could go up to like $2.6 billion potentially. So it's pretty high stakes. So you can expect a very contested appeal on this. I doubt it would be resolved too soon, but we'll have to wait and watch.